Amanda's baby Sarah wasn't nursing. Amanda and her husband Paul were both frustrated and exhausted. And this is understandable because Amanda had shared with me the importance for her of breastfeeding. It wasn't just the nutritional benefits, but it was a dream for her to nurse her baby from the time that she was a child herself. She wanted to grow up and breastfeed, she told me, not grow up and have a baby. She saw herself nurturing her baby in every way, including breastfeeding, and they had entered into parenting very consciously, making decisions that would support their intentions. They had a peaceful pregnancy and seemingly uneventful birth at home, so it didn't make sense why she wasn't nursing. By the time they consulted with me, they had seen 3 lactation consultants to try to save their breastfeeding relationship, and none of them had been able to get her nursing. I sat down with them 3 days after Sarah's birth and conducted a session in which I came to learn some things about Sarah's birth that hadn't been immediately apparent. I worked with them with some of this new information in mind, and within about 90 minutes, Sarah began nursing. When I followed up 9 months later with the family, Amanda and Sarah were still happily nursing couple. And this set Sarah and her family up for a very different experience than the trajectory of disappointment and not understanding each other's communication that was happening when I met them. This family taught me some very important lessons about the capacity we all have to heal. This is just one new mother who changed the trajectory of her family's life way beyond the breastfeeding relationship after a difficult beginning. I think of other families who came to see me who were struggling in ways that made no sense and had no apparent basis for even being an issue. The 3.5-year-old girl who never slept well, who never stopped moving or talking, whose exhausted parents came to see me for help. The 6-year-old boy who struggled with transitions like leaving the house or making it to the dinner table with his family in a timely manner. All of these parents came to see me with a story of hardship, of pain, with a story that was troubling them, that they were trying to make sense of, but something was missing. They came to me with a relationship that wasn't working for them, and they didn't know how to resolve the problem. They wanted to know what they weren't seeing or understanding. They wanted things to be better. And while it might be simple enough to look at a problem we're facing, like these various parents faced, and try to solve it, that's not really how it works, does it? Amanda didn't just think about the problem of how to get Sarah to nurse. By the time I met her, she was caught up in the possibility that in her eyes, she wasn't doing a good job, that she was failing as a mother with her 3-day-old baby and nursing, the things that really mattered to her. Amanda wasn't just looking for a solution. She was telling herself a story. We all have stories about the things that have happened to us. Stories help us make sense of our world. The story is a representation of the state of the relationship. When a relationship isn't working, the stories we tell ourselves about the relationship continue to perpetuate our belief about the relationship. We unconsciously look for signs that confirm the story we have about the relationship, and that means that we miss other things that are happening or other explanations for what we're seeing because it is settled in our minds. And whether we're 3, 6, or 76, each of us tends to hold on to a story that no longer serves us. My oldest son was a high needs baby and young child, the kind of little one who needs a lot of support to settle and who has many sensitivities, which only became more intense when his younger brother Jacob died at birth when Zach was almost 4. At the time, I trained as a marriage and family therapist, and I was working to support families with their attachment relationships in groups in the community I lived in. I had over 10 years experience working with children and families by then, so I was familiar with nurturing parent-child relationships. This was before I started the Consciously Parenting Project and before I knew about the world of prenatal and perinatal somatic psychology. But despite all the training that I did have, I didn't have the tools to understand what was happening, how Jacob's death had impacted my family and my relationship with my son, or what to do about it. The hardship we had experienced to that point had spiraled our relationship down a path that was dark for both of us. I didn't know how to shift what was happening in our relationship or the story I was telling myself about the relationship that wasn't serving either of us. It was an intense time for me as I struggled to find another way to understand what was happening and to shift the intense story that we were playing out together. One sunny afternoon in Florida, when he was about 8, he became very angry. He was shouting and throwing things around the room, as he often did when he was upset. But then something shifted for us. and I experienced a transformation in my relationship with my son. That moment started us on a path to a healthy relationship. And now at 24, he's actually one of my favorite people. Amanda was able to nurse her baby, which was so important to her, and she was able to enjoy her daughter. The 3.5-year-old finally slept well and settled in her body. The 6-year-old was able to leave the house with his family and join them for dinner without drama. These shifts all happened for the same reason, the same insight. And that insight is what I'm here to share with you today. But as you may remember, along with all enjoying a positive outcome, these situations all have something else in common. They presented with problems that didn't make any sense. What is it that we're not seeing when we look at situations like this? Parents and most professionals don't know that early life can have the impact that it does, and so they don't look for answers there. But early life, including preconception and birth, can have a big impact on the story that is shown after birth, throughout childhood, and throughout adulthood. And with this role that early life can play comes in an opportunity for us to look for something that we didn't know to look for that is being shown right before our eyes. But what is it that we're meant to look for? When we're talking about experiences that happen very early in life, we're still very much in our implicit somatic memory, or memory without words. In very early life, we're absorbing everything that happens to us without a filter, without understanding what is happening, without words to express our experiences. And we're orienting to our most important relationship, the one with our mother, which is how we begin to make sense of the world and what is happening to us. As a result, these experiences are stored in the body and become the way that we show up, the way that we show our story. According to my mentor, Ray Castellino, a pioneer in the field of prenatal and perinatal somatic psychology, in very simple terms, these stories show up as a sequence of before the beginning, the middle, the end, and the after. The story in the body, or the sequence we experienced coming into the world, becomes the foundation of the way we approach everything. We show this sequence through our facial expressions, sounds, and body movements, then later the words we choose when language becomes possible. But more importantly, it sets us up for attachment relationships, or how we connect, or not, with others. It's the story we show the world without conscious awareness that we are showing our early stories. So, for example, in my own life, I was born via emergency cesarean section after 26 hours of labor. Because I had a very fast beginning, middle, end, being born in 2 minutes, I often get disoriented in the middle of any process that is long. My own birth imprint showed up creating this talk because the middle was disorienting for me, and it was the hardest part of putting everything together. This is the story in my body, the imprint of my own birth that still shows up today. But because I've had a lot of the right kind of support, this story serves me and helps me to have more compassion for myself when I struggle. And I know I need to reach out for support to move through it, just as the doctors were able to help me be born. This is what's so central to that afternoon when my son was 8 and was very angry. Normally when that happened, I just tried to stay calm and calm him down, but that never worked because I wasn't actually calm. I was afraid and sad and probably a little angry too. But then something shifted in me. Somehow, and without even meaning to, I became curious about what was going on for him. I looked over at him and really saw him and what he was showing me in that moment. I could see him, the little boy who was struggling so much and who had lost so much. And suddenly I was flooded with empathy for him. Later on, after studying with Ray and others, I would come to understand that when he was born, we had experienced a disconnection because of the medication used to induce labor after the waters broke and labor didn't begin. And through my own exhaustion of a very fast labor, I hadn't been able to connect with him the way that I'd wanted to. That disconnection showed up for us again and again after his brother Jacob died. In that moment, he was showing me what happened to him. When I spoke to him from that place in my heart, instead of him continuing to be angry, he looked me in the eyes and started to cry. I offered him a hug after a few minutes and he melted into my arms and we both cried together. The story of him being angry and me being unable to help him was gone. Amanda and Paul, with their baby Sarah, who wasn't nursing, all needed the space to express their stories, to be seen, heard, and felt, so that they could make peace with the story of baby Sarah not nursing and realize that she was actually showing them the story of what happened to her. She had been suctioned rather aggressively right after she was born, and she didn't want anything in her mouth. It wasn't about breastfeeding, but the story she was showing about what happened to her. Sarah's parents arrived with curiosity about what their baby needed to show them and what Sarah was needing, which was to go slowly as they approached her mouth and give her the choice to latch. And within a short time, they were nursing. We discovered that the 3.5-year-old had a very traumatic birth in which she had been wedged in the birth canal for many hours before she was born via cesarean section. This was the story she was showing by not sleeping and her continuous movement and talking. Her parents were able to really get the story that she was showing us through her behavior, and the whole family was finally able to sleep. We made a big connection with the 6-year-old's premature birth due to a medical issue with his mother, and that he was still showing his story of not being ready to be born by not being ready for any transition that wasn't on his terms. After the session, he was able to leave the house without drama, much to the relief of his family. So what do these transformations have in common? When something happens to us that is overwhelming to us, we try to orient to safety. Birth, even when it goes well, can be overwhelming for mother, father, partner, and baby. Orienting to safety with another person activates our social nervous system. We look to each other's faces. We seek reassurance through smell, through touch, a soothing voice. We slow down together. When we find that safety and connection, we settle. When parents are dysregulated, it's really hard to connect and orient to the relationship with the baby. And when the baby is dysregulated and not settling easily, we make up a story to make sense of what's happening. Sometimes that story is helpful, and sometimes it isn't. When we can actually see each other with curiosity rather than holding tight to a story we're telling ourselves or telling about ourselves or the other person, it allows us to connect in a deep way. Our nervous system shifts into a resting state, and we feel safe in our bodies in connection with each other. In order to shift into this resting state, we all need to slow down together. And we can do this by using brief, frequent eye contact, looking at each other, looking away, looking back, touch and attention and permission. This is co-regulation. Co-regulation is where one nervous system calms the other nervous system, which results in a positive feedback loop between the two people. So a baby who is upset is held lovingly by a parent or caregiver who gently rocks the baby and sings softly to the baby. The baby settles. The parent settles more deeply. They are regulating one another. From a lay perspective, we can consider co-regulation the equivalent of compassionate connection, being invested in and curious about the other person's experience in that moment and the story they are showing. If someone can see, hear, and feel us when we go through something that is distressing, or can be with us in the after of that experience, we relate to that story differently. By bringing presence, intention, and attention to the story of what happened, the nervous system shifts, which means the story can shift as well. The shift that happens in the nervous system when we feel safe, when we feel someone else hears, sees, and feels us, brings us into the present moment. When we come into the relationship with curiosity about what else we aren't seeing, it makes room for compassionate connection. It is through an experience like this that we can let go of a story we told ourselves to make sense of what was happening. And we can see the story that is being shown to us about what happened. And this opens up possibility for a new way of being in connection with one another by taking into account that which we couldn't see before, but that was probably in plain sight the whole time. This may sound like it should have been obvious why Sarah wasn't nursing and why all the other families, including my own, were struggling so much, but it isn't. It's outside of our experiences to even consider that something that happened before, during, or after birth could be impacting the baby's ability to take in nourishment or to nurse. We don't look there for answers to our questions, and everyone feels alone with what's happened. So like Amanda, it becomes a story of how we have failed as a parent, or that there must be something wrong with the baby or the child. And if it feels unsolvable, if we can't change the other person or change ourselves enough to make a difference, our minds fill in the details without our conscious awareness, and it boxes us into a story we have about what's happening or what happened in the past. But the reality is that the baby is showing a story that no one has helped us to see or understand. At the beginning, I promised you that all the various situations I described, including the one with my son, all came down to a simple shift. And while we can often think that these problems are unsolvable, the truth is we can let go of stories that no longer serve us when we can bring curiosity about the story being shown. Now that's our North Star. Our way forward is to be curious about the story being shown to us. But how can we make that actionable? What could you start doing by tonight in order to begin incorporating this into your own personal and professional relationships? Perhaps the simplest thing that you can do is slow down. In a time of conflict, rather than immediately responding to it, you can take a deep breath, feel your feet on the ground, look around the room before you open your mouth to say something. And like I've already said, being curious about the situation will go a long way in coming to understand what the story is that you're being shown. When some sort of puzzling or disturbing situation emerges with someone in your life, after you pause, you can ask a question like, I wonder what else is happening right now that I can't see. With these tools, you will hold the possibility that things are happening that you don't fully understand, that there could be a story that is being shown to you that you haven't seen yet, and that might shift if you begin to be curious about it. And this is true just as much for a relationship with someone else as it is for your relationship with yourself. My mentor, Ray Castellino, and I were working on a series of interviews before he got sick. Unfortunately, we lost him at the end of 2020. Ray taught me how to see the story that is being shown. I want to share Ray's thoughts with you in his own words. This is a 3-minute video, and it captures the cadence of his work with babies and their families, as well as adults who want to explore their own early stories.
Now, I want to go back to this notion about it's never too late to heal, right? Okay, because the notion is that there's a primary period right after a baby's born that is sacred and must be honored, and we need to do everything we can for moms and babies to connect with each other and to bond and attach. And it used to be felt that there's nothing that you can do about it, because if you miss that period, then it's missed. And I want to tell you that we've found that notion is not true. In the work in APPPAH for 25 years now with families, over 280 families. We've found that true in our work with adults, in the small group work that I do with adults. I've occasionally, like, will have a parent and an adult sibling, where, you know, the mother of their adult child wants to heal the birth that they had, and they have a common experience where they can actually find their way into connection when they were separated or when the child was born. Common scenario, the separation. And so in the work, what we do, whatever the trauma is, whatever the separating factors are, we can sit down in the presence of the moment, connected to the feelings of the blueprint, of that settling, of that expansion, of that connection. internally and together. We do that. And touch the memory of what happened before that separated us. We can actually not even have to relive the trauma, but we can actually find our way into a new co-regulated space around something that wasn't possible when those things occurred before. So the take-home point here is that it's never too late. It's never too late to have that change happen internally within ourselves. It's never too late to have it happen between ourselves. And it's never too late for it to happen with our kids and us with them. And it doesn't matter how old we are.
Thank you, Ray. What Ray shared shows us that it is never too late to heal. And the mission of APPPAH is to co-create a world where all babies feel welcomed, seen, and nurtured beginning in the womb, where all pregnant women feel fully supported throughout pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum time, and where all support members of the birth process are educated about the impact of pregnancy and birth throughout our lives. Consider supporting APPPAH in its mission by becoming a member. As the former co-director of education for APPPAH's education department, I know firsthand the importance of the work APPPAH is doing in the lives of parents and professionals around the world. Help APPPAH and I spread the message of hope for families to begin the work of compassionate recovery, to let go of the stories that are no longer serving them, to bring curiosity about the story that is being shown to them about what happened to them. Thank you for your support of this important mission.